A new Star Wars journey begins in the place all good journeys begin. At, well, the beginning. This Star Wars Day, I'm excited to introduce the new Star Wars Canon Timeline podcast, where we will piece together the complete story of that galaxy far, far away, in timeline order, from the dawn of the Jedi through the great unknown following the sequel trilogy. This is a podcast for both Star Wars superfans and complete newbies. Listen to the short intro episode now to hear how it works and what to expect over the coming weeks as we set the stage for the new television series The Acolyte, which we will be covering with weekly breakdowns. Subscribe to the Star Wars Canon Timeline podcast wherever you listen to take part in one of the most epic and expansive stories ever told, following all the twists and turns from start to finish. May the 4th be with you all month and beyond. Hello, fellow Canon Timeline travelers. This is going to be a slightly shorter episode because we're talking about a game that doesn't exist yet, Star Wars Eclipse. It probably won't be released until 2026 or later, but a couple of years ago they dropped a trailer that got people buzzing, and since the game fits into this part of the timeline, we're going to break down that trailer to see what kind of hints we can glean about what looks to be the early High Republic. This conversation is in two parts. First, DeadeyeJediBob and I listen to the audio description version of the trailer and talk lore. You'll find links to both versions of the trailer in the show notes, by the way. Then, after the break, Marcin and I swap insights into the gaming industry and particularly the history and reputation of the makers of this game, Quantic Dreams. What do we expect based on what we know? And as always, we keep it friendly for non-gamers as well so that everyone can be caught up on the news. The usual disclaimer applies. My conversation with Bob was recorded May 21st, 2024, and my conversation with Marcin on May 10th. Everything we say was accurate on those dates to the best of our knowledge, and we'll be back with updates once we know more. So please, enjoy our preview of Star Wars Eclipse. So I am here with Bob again, and are you ready to talk some Star Wars Eclipse?
Oh, I think I was born ready.
So this game, it's set in the High Republic. We're not really sure when, but I'm going to guess the early High Republic, since that's kind of not as well covered. And we know that this game's not really supposed to have any overlap with the books and the multimedia project. So that's my guess for now. We'll see.
Yeah, I would say early for me too. That sounds very plausible.
This game had its world premiere at the Game Awards, and they made a trailer, and it's not with game footage. It's more of a concept trailer, but with like really high quality CGI. But fortunately, in addition to the CGI version, which basically just plays with music, there is also an audio description version. So, funny story, Bob. When I was looking, I was like, oh, there must be an audio description version. And I found it on YouTube. And then what's the first comment I see below? It's one from Radar Technician Bob made 2 years ago.
Whoa. I totally forgot I put that there.
Yeah, you and I have both been excited about this for a while.
I can't believe it's been 2 years since they've shown that. Wow.
Yeah. So I'm going to be discussing the development and the game studio involved and some of the controversy around the game studio involved with Marcin in the second half of this episode. But first, we just wanted to start with a conversation with Bob and I. We're going to start with, I'm going to drop the audio description version of the trailer in here. So you can watch the trailer yourself following the link in the show notes. But you can also just listen right here, and that gives you a better understanding of how Bob experiences these stories. Okay, let's hit play.
Disclaimer, rating pending. A drummer swings a mallet in front of a giant drum embedded in tree roots. Across the sun's molten surface, an eclipse starts to form. A human's blue eye reflects the encroaching eclipse. The gray-skinned drummer lifts mallets in both hands as the eclipse begins. Light shimmers over a metallic logo of a word arched over another word, Lucasfilm Games. In space, light shines on an asteroid belt drifting above a sage-green planet's atmosphere. A rusty red planet and a blue planet wait beyond it. A smoking starship barrels toward the green planet, leaving pieces of it in its wake. On the planet, ships fly above a bustling cityscape. In a bazaar, a pet seller carries three-eyed beaked creatures in baskets. A Mon Calamari arrives. A stranger, face concealed by a hat, sits in a corner. On the busy street, a Duros avoids guards. In the dark, 4 drummers beat drums. At sunrise, a speeder bike races past a rock formation and an animal at a pond. Yoda looks out the window of an empty Jedi council room. People in red robes carrying staffs move through the bazaar. A droid studies a desolate environment. The blue eye reflects the half-complete Eclipse. Jedi duel on a bridge with lightsabers. A starship lands on a pier above water. In the dark, 6 drummers hit smaller drums while 2 more beat giant drums secured by tree roots. Ships fly toward a fortress in an icy landscape. A rogue Nemoidian stands in a chamber. Jedi face attackers in the snow. A regal woman stands in burning ruins. A massive army approaches, stretching to a mountainous horizon line. Total eclipse draws near. During a space battle, starships trade fire. Explosions burst on a larger ship below them. Cannons on the larger ship fire at the smaller starships. During the space battle, the fleet of smaller ships dives around a larger ship as fire rains down on them. 5 drummers face tree-embedded drums. One turns around, revealing an alien species with black eyes, narrow high nostrils, and a ribbed head. Paint marks its muscular chest. A humanoid shape emerges from a stone pool filled with black, viscous liquid. Drenched in the liquid, it rolls back its shoulders and lifts its head. As the eclipse reaches totality, a title appears over it. Star Wars Eclipse. The eclipse vanishes, leaving the title in gold letters on a black background. A logo appears next to a white and blue Q. Quantic Dream. Text appears. StarWarsEclipse.com. Hashtag Star Wars Eclipse. Not actual gameplay.
Okay, so Bob, 2 years ago, what got you so excited about that trailer?
I think those mysterious aliens that we see throughout, and I would say most definitely the figure rising out of that black pool at the end. I love the I don't know if I should say horror vibes or not, but I love the atmosphere of the trailer.
Yeah.
I think that was actually the first time I'd heard Christina Lau doing audio description work. She has also done work on the Mortal Kombat 1 video game. If you turn on your accessibility features in that game and you perform a fatality, you're going to hear her describing the actions on screen. If you play story mode in Mortal Kombat 1, you're going to hear her describing everything that goes on in there. And I love her voice when it comes to audio description. I think she puts a lot into it. And as she's narrating what's going on in the Eclipse trailer, she just puts so much, I would say, emotion into her work. And I hate that quite a few people on the internet have mistaken voiceovers like her, voiceover talent like her, as AI. It's most definitely not an AI.
No.
I think that she has done a fantastic job with the trailer, and it certainly made me want to play the game. As to whether or not I'm going to be able to, I think that'll be telling, because they haven't really announced any accessibility features in terms of the game. But I'd like to think if they released a trailer with audio description, there's probably going to be something on the horizon.
Right. I think that's what your comment might have said under the trailer. Yeah, Marcin and I talk a bit about the previous games developed by this studio. They haven't necessarily been accessible, although they seem to be taking steps in that direction with the last one, which was Detroit. And I wonder if right now, as Marcin and I will discuss, they are biting off a pretty big chunk to chew in terms of trying to level up the ability of games that this studio, Quantic Studio, can produce. So I'm really hoping that indeed the fact that they have this audio description trailer shows that from the get-go, they're already thinking about these accessibility features, which I think are probably I don't know, game developers, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they're easier to implement than some of the other gameplay features that they've been promising, and we'll see whether or not they deliver.
Right.
Yeah, I love that this trailer, this game is set in the Outer Rim, and we get to see, the crowded streets, and it really brings you down to street level. So you go through these streets of all these different types of aliens and stuff, really makes you feel immersed in this world. But of course, everybody's talking about these gray aliens that pop up, which seem to live underground, which kind of would make sense. And what they look like is they are gray humanoids, and almost they look like they could be distant relatives of the Nemodians that we talked about in the High Republic overview, who are the species that started the Trade Federation, which we're going to talk about more in the prequel trilogy era. So the difference is they have like the flat face, but they're not completely noseless like the Nemodians. They have instead between their eyes, just below between their eyes, they have these kind of like upside down nostrils. So it does make me wonder if there's any distant relation to them, or if they might be the realization of something from Legends that we've not seen, or just something new altogether. Do you have any theories, Bob?
They certainly made this as enigmatic as they could, so I have absolutely no idea what we're in for at this point. My first thought, and of course it's not true at all, but I was thinking, oh, is that the Vong? But no, they look totally different than this species of alien. I think they're more skeletal in terms of their facial structure. But I have no idea who these guys are. I think the audio description mentioned a head crest. I'm not sure, though. I think it does.
They have like ridges on their heads. And so I saw someone on Reddit, and I'll credit their name, the PBG48 said that they thought that it could be the Comite species, which is a species confirmed in canon, but which is just referenced like in a reference book. And in Legends, they played a bigger role, and they are grayish with head ridges. Although I think that these aliens look more like the Nemonians than the Comites, but it could be either, or it could be something completely different.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of the Comites before?
That name is ringing a very faint bell. I wonder if they were in comics.
They were known they existed around 1000 BBY, so that would be around the start of the High Republic, or just before the High Republic, I should say. And they were known for their cloning technology.
Oh my.
Of course, we'll meet another species later known for their cloning technology, and these are completely different. But yeah, I mean, based on where they are in the timeline, it makes sense that it could be related to them, but these do, at least the way they're drawn, they seem to have little noses. So I don't know. Mysteries, fun mysteries.
Right.
But yeah, they propagate through cloning. So what if like that's what we see with one arising out of the black goo? Maybe that's a new clone.
That very well could be.
These are just ideas. There's one other Easter egg that I have to point out. There is a droid who actually looks like a proto C-3PO. Like it looks like C-3PO, but without the outer shell. So sort of like the 3CPO we see later in episode 1 of the prequel trilogy.
Yeah, that was where my mind automatically went, because I do own the quote-unquote naked version of the C-3PO.
Right. It's a naked C-3PO. So it could just be another protocol droid. Now, C-3PO is an important protocol droid we'll meet later. And protocol droids they're kind of like diplomatic droids who speak a bunch of languages and do negotiations and things like that. So it could just be another protocol droid, or maybe, they're always stretching back the story of 3CPO earlier and earlier. So what if it was a proto version of him that a character later gets his hands on and is able to reassemble from pieces?
Right. I like that they also give you a little peek at Yoda in the trailer as well. According to the audio description, he's sitting alone in, I believe it's described as an empty Jedi Council chamber. So I'm like, what are you doing in there, man? What you thinking about?
Yeah, okay, so that does help date it, actually. So we know that it must take place, after around 700 or so BBY.
Right.
The fact that he's there. But yeah, definitely there's a shot looking out of the Jedi Council chamber. So we know that there'll be definitely a Jedi aspect to this game.
I feel like whenever he's sitting alone in either the council chamber and you see Yoda looking out a window, something bad's about to happen.
That's fair.
I'm thinking of the old Gendy Tartakovsky micro series just before a very battle happens in that. He's just kind of sitting there looking out of a window and then all hell breaks loose.
Yeah. I was thinking about that Clone Wars series, the old Legends version, and wondering if there shouldn't be an episode dedicated to that as well, because it's Legends now, but it's so iconic.
It is. And even though there is no dialogue in that whatsoever, it is one of my favorite things to go back and try to listen to.
Yeah. It actually has some of my favorite versions of some characters who show up in the prequel series, like side characters a lot of people wouldn't have even heard of, like Shakti and what's his name? Fisk.
Fisto, yeah.
Uh-huh. So we know that it's going to be like, it seems like we're going to be able to see all different sides of the High Republic through this game. Like, we're going to obviously see the Jedi side. And it looks like we're obviously going to see something from the perspective of these new aliens and whatever's going on there. It seems like we're going to see things on street level, like distant trading posts in the Outer Rim. Maybe we'll probably, I'm guessing, get to play as some sort of what they call scoundrel characters.
Yeah. I hope that you're able to play as quite a large variety of characters. From what I tried reading up on the project, you're probably going to be able to play as more than one type of character. So I'd love to be able to play as Jedi, and then hopefully some of the new we don't know whether or not they're antagonists, but I would imagine they probably are. I would love to play as a villain at some point. It's always fun to see things through their eyes.
I mean, I would guess there's probably because the way that Quantic Dream does these games, basically you play as multiple different characters and then you can shape them, and the character might die and you keep going, so you can probably have some characters that could become heroes or could become villains depending on how you play.
That sounds fantastic.
I mean, all of this is speculation, but that's what we're here to do today.
We certainly are.
Any more thoughts or hopes on the Star Wars Eclipse game?
Well, I think when it comes to a Star Wars game with menu narration, audio cues, directional assist, I feel like we're way past overdue for one. And it's one of my great hopes that this could be one of those games. This could be something really big. I don't know whether or not it is. I'm not going to get my hopes up too high, but I would very much like to play this.
Yes. I'm really, really hoping and going to be writing angry letters if not. And yes, I can be an angry letter writer when corporations fail me.
I can too.
But I mean, I really hope that this is something that they are already planning right now as they're developing. It's going to be a while before we see this game, but hopes are high.
They are indeed.
And that was my chat with DeadeyeJediBob. Check the comments for a link to his YouTube channel to see his own gaming in action. I'll be right back after the break to talk about the controversy around Quantic Dreams and what we think is reasonable to expect from this game. Okay, and I have Marcin here again after our excellent conversation about the Old Republic games. He's agreed to come chat about the High Republic game Star Wars Eclipse, which was announced at the Game Awards in December of 2021, then listed as, quote unquote, in early development. What did you think of the trailer overall, Marcin?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great, especially the music. It's very gripping. It's very unique in terms of Star Wars setting. The art style is obviously very different from all the other Star Wars games.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's worth pointing out that the studio Quantic Dream is very good in that cinematic feel and producing games that actually feel like interactive movies more
Mm-hmm.
than actual gameplay heavy games. So I'm not really surprised that they managed to come up with such an incredible trailer. But obviously their games are very polarizing. So yeah, I'm very excited
Mm-hmm.
for how it looks like, but I'm also cautious for now as well.
You mean polarizing because some people like the way that their games play, and some people not
Yes.
so much. Okay,
Some people actually call it interactive movie rather than a game.
right. Okay.
I belong to the more favorable camp.
Mm-hmm.
I do enjoy the games. I think that they do bring something very unique to the table.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in general, I feel any kind of game, as long as it's enjoyed by some group of people, has a place
Right.
to exist.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, from what I've seen in terms of reviews and player opinions, their games can be can it's either love or hate relationship rather than something that's enjoyed by most people,
Right.
or something that's kind of not great, but still
Yeah.
playable by majority of players. Here it's usually a niche of people who hate it and like it, and most people just not even being aware that those games exist. I think.
um.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I think Star Wars, their entrance into Star Wars universe is
Mm-hmm.
something that probably they feel like is something that will propel them into a higher level of fame. And yeah, I guess
Right.
from that perspective, I'm hopeful that they'll come up with something truly incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, I've only played one of their games, Detroit Become Human, where you play as different android characters, and it's I really liked it. I found the favorable side because it's a lot about moral quandaries and all that stuff that I find really interesting. I think you've played different games of theirs than I have, right?
Yes, I played Detroit. I didn't finish it, but
Okay.
yes, it definitely, yeah, a lot of mechanics from previous games were
Mm-hmm.
improved and built upon in Detroit. But I played two of their games, Indigo Prophecy on PS2 and Heavy Rain on PS3. So that's another PS3
Okay.
game that I played, that I'm thankful for having PS3 for, because it was a PS3 exclusive at the time when it
Yeah.
came out. And yeah, these are definitely very story heavy games, and they're full of quick time events. So
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons why a lot of people call them interactive movies, because
Mm-hmm.
we don't really have so much freedom in character movement and character, um, in where our character goes or what he or she does. We are just simply thrown into certain scene, into certain situation,
Mm-hmm.
and we feel like we're watching a movie, but we have to intervene at some points in
Right.
order to progress the story.
Right.
Heavy Rain is especially interesting game because it feels like playing through Seven, the movie.
Okay.
It's like a very heavy thriller with very dark tones, and it's very psychological, and also provides some choice in what we do and how we control characters within the game. So there are definitely a lot of moral questions there that are very
Mm-hmm.
gray, and I think yeah, definitely Quantic Dreams is a studio that doesn't shy away from those difficult topics
Right.
or difficult moral questions,
Right.
and from showing something for more mature audiences even.
Right.
even though maybe perhaps it's sometimes they fall short of certain aspects. I think nevertheless still Heavy Rain is a very special game, and I think everybody should at least experience it once to at least
Okay.
develop an idea about it. They might
Okay.
hate it after, but it will leave a lasting impression.
Yeah. Okay.
Definitely.
And also another one of their more popular games is Beyond Two Souls. People might have heard of that one too. But one thing I find interesting about their games, which they've explicitly stated will be true in the Star Wars game, is that since you're playing multiple characters in the game, characters can die, and then but the game continues, and you don't respawn the character that died in that game. So that happened with me in
That's
Detroit, right out the
exactly.
gate. Yeah.
That's very interesting, and it does remind me of Heavy Rain as well. It was so those branching choices, and at some point we were allowed to fail some even QuickTime events while controlling certain character, and this character might die, or he might fail certain task or certain quest that he was supposed to do, and the game would still continue. The story would still continue. Perhaps we would not reach the best ending,
Yeah.
or the ending that would be satisfactory for all the characters that are a part of the game, but still it's hard to deny that it's a very unique approach to game design,
Yeah.
and it would be very interesting to see how that's perfected in a Star Wars game.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, you said something you said to me when I mentioned this game to you is that what's interesting is that this Eclipse game is announced as a quote unquote action game. So this means that if they are genuinely making it an action game, and maybe this has something to do with the delays, they have to come up with a new game mechanics system.
Indeed. I think action. I would not really call a quick game of full of quick time events an action game. I mean, of
No.
course, it is an action game in a sense
Nope.
that we have to perform certain time limited actions, but still, it's not an action game. In the understanding of latest Jedi games, Jedi Knight
Yeah.
games, Jedi Survivor, for example. Here, it's a truly action game. It's an action adventure game where we can control our character freely,
Right.
and we jump ledges, we solve puzzles, we fight different characters, and that's what I understand as being a truly an action game, and it will be very interesting to see how they implement that, because I cannot recall any game, any previous other games that would have this kind of mechanic. It's usually our characters. It's like in Detroit, where our characters are set in a certain scene, and we have certain limited freedom while we explore that scene, but we cannot really go anywhere we want, or we cannot really explore the world in a traditional way.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it seems like at least their intention at the beginning was indeed to make it more of this typical, more RPG style, or, where you're controlling the character and walking through the world rather than being put in scenarios and reacting to them, which is at least was my experience with Detroit, and I assume is the typical Quantic Dream.
Yes.
But I love, the trailer. Again, it's CGI, but it gives a suggestion that they have ideas about the world building, and it's exciting because it feels, it's set in this High Republic time, and we don't know when in the High Republic time. I'm just guessing for now it's early High Republic, because they say that it's going to be original story with unique characters. So not characters from the books of the Acolytes, although, maybe there are cameos from characters from other stories in this part of the timeline. Who knows? Maybe Yoda pops up. I'm thinking probably not, though. That doesn't seem like the tone. But you never know. But I love the use of the drums in the trailer. That was really cool.
Definitely the music, definitely music is a great part of that trailer, and immediately stands out.
And there's a lot going on in there in terms of world building teases. So it actually, like, the way it draws you into these bustling market scenes and things like that, it kind of makes Star Wars feel more palpable than any other game I've seen yet, which again, these are not game graphics, but it just shows how they're looking at the game in terms of that feeling of immersion, hopefully. Yeah, and again, the story, they're calling it intricately branching with an array of playable characters, typical thing that we've been talking about, but there's definitely going to be some interesting lore introduced, like who or what are the drumming aliens with those noseless faces with upside down nostrils emerging from Harkonnen like black goo. It's
I
very
mean, they do
Dune.
look cool. One I have to admit, they
Mm-hmm.
do, and it's very ambiguous. It's hard to say if they're actually bad characters or if they are good or if they are
Right,
neutral. But yeah, their design is so unique. Um,
right. They look like a species that evolved underground.
yeah, or underwater, maybe somewhere in the
Mm,
depths of some deep oceans, something
mm.
like that.
Yeah, but it seems like opening up a new can of lore, which I'm always here for. But we don't know. We have no idea when we're actually going to get this game because it seems like there was, have you heard about the behind the scenes drama at Quantic Dreams where the CEO got in some trouble for mistreating employees?
Yes, well, I mean, I know that the CEO is definitely a very controversial figure in terms of. Uh, I know him. I know controversies about him from the time even of Heavy Rain or Indigo
Mhm.
Prophecy games, where um, perhaps all the stories of mistreatment of employees were not so well known, but his
Mm.
very bombastic promises about how what the games are going to deliver, you definitely cannot deny him vision and ambition,
Okay.
but
Mhm.
but it feels like it's he just always wants to promise, and he has this amazing vision of how the game should look like, which usually is stopped by the technology at the time. So perhaps
Mhm.
the consoles are not able to deliver, and are not
Right.
powerful enough to actually fully implement the vision that he has. And this has been a common theme that I've seen
Right.
in the past. I think he perhaps, well, he learned his lesson, and he stopped promising as much.
Mhm.
Or perhaps there's someone else who's controlling him behind the scenes.
Mhm.
But I think it toned down a little bit
Yeah.
during the release of Detroit.
Okay.
So it seems like the game actually delivered on what was promised, and it actually was received in a much more favorable way by critics and
Right.
reviewers and gamers in general. So
Yeah. I mean, he's promising like a whole new evolution of game mechanics, so maybe we should temper our expectations on that front.
yes, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised, and perhaps it's not mistreatment of employees. I've seen that this story happening many times before, when where some ambitious CEO has so many expectations and is so driven and expects their employees to be the same, that he pushes them to the limit and expects them to do overtime and
Mhm.
yeah, just be
Yeah.
on the same page as him,
Yeah.
which leads to situations like that. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's because of that, because he's so ambitious and so into his own
Yeah.
ideas, that he doesn't see how costly that is for his employees or for people who work
Right.
with him.
Yeah, I mean, so on the game mechanic side, even if it's basically just the same game mechanics in Detroit, where you're put in situations rather than like walking, well, you walk around in Detroit, but even if it's like that, I'm still so excited. On the human capital side, then yeah, that's as someone who's worked in not AAA studios, but who's worked in the game industry, it is a very real problem. So I'm glad that it's getting attention called to it, and apparently enough attention called to it that he had some trouble hiring people to work on this game, which is, you would think want to come work on a Star Wars game should be an easy pitch. So it
Yes,
shows.
but at the same time, it's an yeah, it's a common trap to actually employ people by promising them
Right.
something amazing, and
Mhm.
actually then expecting way too much, just
Right.
by capitalizing on their passion for the project.
Right.
So
Exactly. Yeah, and it does seem, as you were suggesting, that he's being managed better by other parties. He's got managers on him now, managing how he manages. I can't really say if that's led to real change at Quantic Dream. I hope so. But yeah, I'm not anticipating that this game is going to release anytime soon. I'm kind of hoping for 2026, but I feel like that's maybe even that is too optimistic. And regardless, it seems like it's going to be a late gen for like PS5 and all the equivalent. I'm like, oh yeah, and the other consoles I don't care about.
which would actually follow follow the pattern here, because I think Heavy Rain was actually the only game for PS3 that was released from the studio. Indigo Prophecy, same thing. It was the only game released for PS2. So then they had well, no, there was also Beyond Two Souls. Yeah, there was the other game that was released on PS3 still. But I think Detroit was the only one released on PS4. Yeah. So actually, I wouldn't be surprised if that was actually the only game of the studio released on PS5. It seems to be their pattern. It seems to be the way how they operate. And well, if that works out for them, it's fine.
If it leads to a good game, take your time. I'm very excited for it regardless. Just everything that I've seen so far, the employee complaints aside, which by the way were not directly related to this game. It's just fallout from previous experiences. But aside from that, everything that I've heard about this has just got me hyped. So bring it on whenever it's ready.
Sure.
All right. Well, thanks for having a chat about Eclipse, and obviously, when it comes out, we're gonna play the hell out of it and talk about it. So, hold your breath for 3 years. Bye.
Bye.
And that wraps up our preview of Star Wars Eclipse. I'll keep the outro short for this one since it's meant to be a mini-up, but this podcast was produced by me, published by the Lore-Hounds. If you enjoyed this podcast, you could do me a huge favor that won't cost you a thing. As a new podcast, we need some nice reviews and ratings to make sure we don't get buried amongst all the content out there. So 5-star ratings are a huge help to us, especially at this stage. And as is any recommendations you can give to other Star Wars loving or Star Wars curious friends, please do pass any episodes you've enjoyed along. Thank you in advance. The feedback I've gotten so far has been so energizing, and I'm excited to talk it through per era in some upcoming mailbag episodes. And if those episodes are out when you listen to this, there will always be follow-ups, so please do send any thoughts you might have to swtimelinepodcast@gmail.com. And also, check out the Lorehounds link in the show notes to see all our affiliates, including We'll Shift Dust, my adaptation analysis podcast. And join us on Discord to chat about what we're covering on this podcast and Star Wars in general and all other things pop culture. That link in the show notes as well. If you're listening at the time of release, the next episode coming your way in a few days is our summary of everything you need to know about Young Jedi Adventures Season 1, whether you watched any of it yourself or not. That will be Bob and I again, but with a drop-in conversation with a new voice for the podcast. Parent, professional animator, and longtime friend of mine, Hjalti Hjalmarsson. Until then, may the Force be with all who champion game developer rights. A new Star Wars journey begins in the place all good journeys begin. At, well, the beginning. This Star Wars Day, I'm excited to introduce the new Star Wars Canon Timeline podcast, where we will piece together the complete story of that galaxy far, far away, in timeline order, from the dawn of the Jedi through the great unknown following the sequel trilogy. This is a podcast for both Star Wars superfans and complete newbies. Listen to the short intro episode now to hear how it works and what to expect over the coming weeks as we set the stage for the new television series The Acolyte, which we will be covering with weekly breakdowns. Subscribe to the Star Wars Canon Timeline podcast wherever you listen to take part in one of the most epic and expansive stories ever told, following all the twists and turns from start to finish. May the 4th be with you all month, and beyond.